I'm Jim Czek. You're watching Now Media. With me again, John Carpay from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. You're a busy guy these days. Lots to talk about. And oh my, right? Like it seems like the Canada's gone a little crazy here. We have Sean Foyt, a Christian singer, trying to go across Canada with his Christian concerts. And then we have the Nova Scotia Premier banning going into the woods here. Sean Foyt actually retweeted this here. And we're going to play this clip here first, and then we'll get into it. How's that?
Sounds great.
We're going to try anyway. It should come in a second here.
That's the
use of vehicles in the woods are 4 p.m. today. We're telling Nova Scotians, stay out of the woods. We are restricting travel and activities that really aren't necessary for most of us. Hiking, camping, fishing, and the use of vehicles in the woods are not permitted. Trail systems through woods are off limits. Camping is allowed, but only in official campgrounds. The fine for violating any of these bans is the same as the fine for the ban on burning, $25,000. And if you're a smoker, for God's sakes, be mindful of where you're butting your butt out. If you don't, and you cause a fire, we will hold you accountable. So what does this mean if you have a home or cottage surrounded by a wooded area? We strongly encourage you to stay.
So as soon as I watched that clip, I thought of you. I thought, like, how is this even possible? They're basically treating everybody like a criminal. I played a clip this morning in our daily show, and it showed, a guy in Nova Scotia. They're walking, along his usual path where he walks his dog. And he looked backwards and he said, I can walk over there, but I can't walk over there. And I mean, I can understand punishing people that cause fires in that and giving them fines for that, but actually just treating everybody like that and not allowing people into it until October 15th as well.
Well, it's shameful. It's just shameful. There's no rational connection. It is a legitimate goal for a government to want to, prevent all forest fires, or at least, reduce the number of forest fires that get started. So if you have a ban on campfires, which I know a lot of provinces do, many years, no campfires allowed. Okay, you could see how that's related to not starting a forest fire. If a government said that smoking in woods is illegal, whether it's cigarettes or marijuana, pipe, cigar, whatever, no smoking allowed. Okay, fine. You can see there's a rational connection, right? They say you can only smoke inside of a city. Okay. But there's no relationship between, if you or I or anybody else, if you're walking down a hiking trail, that's not causing any kind of risk. This reminds me of the COVID rules, where like a teenager in Ottawa got a $700 ticket for playing basketball outside alone. People getting tickets for sitting on a park bench outside alone. Like there's zero relationship to stopping COVID. And so here, this is completely out of line. And apparently the Nova Scotia Premier is getting so humiliated and ridiculed online that maybe there will be a reversal in the days ahead, although I don't know.
Well, I mean, what worried me is I watched a clip there from one of the compromised media here that takes a lot of money from the government. They were playing a clip from Newfoundland, and they were saying, like there's forest fires in Newfoundland, and just like, what will the government do? Will they take on extra measures? They're actually trying to help do this. And I did see another journalist here in Canada saying, what are people whining about? I mean, not going in the woods. It's just like the media is supposed to call this stuff out and say this is an abuse of power, not actually, support this abuse of power.
Well, the media actively supported the mandatory vaccination policies and all the lockdown policies. There wasn't any objectivity where they would ask some hard questions like, why does everybody need to get injected when in fact, this COVID vaccine does not stop transmission? We all knew it didn't stop transmission. Why should it not just be a personal choice? That's an example of a tough question that media did not ask the chief medical officers.
Well, we tried, but we didn't get access to the microphone. So there's that. So they control the media. So they have select media that the government will take questions from.
One of the things that's disconcerting from that clip from the Nova Scotia Premier is he says activities that are not necessary. This is again, it's like lockdowns. We had like essential businesses and non-essential. Essential apparently included, liquor stores and marijuana stores. But the non-essential was churches, particularly in BC. You had all houses of worship closed, while the bars and restaurants, liquor stores, marijuana stores, strip joints, everything's open except churches are shut down because the politicians decide what is necessary and what is not necessary. So here you've got the Nova Scotia Premier saying that hiking and camping are not necessary. But that's frightening, because at the end of the day, if you really wanted to push that envelope about what's necessary, I mean, all we need is food, water, and shelter. So we could all be locked up in a prison cell getting food and water, and the prison cell's heated, so we're not freezing to death in winter, and we have all that's necessary, right? So it's very dangerous it's a very dangerous logic to start talking about what's not necessary and then taking away people's rights and freedoms to engage in whatever the politician thinks is not necessary.
And again, I think the clip goes on to say that if you have a cabin in the woods, we don't want you going there either. And I think he was a little looser on that, but he did say we don't want you going there. And, that's people's property. And even in an evacuation, when, they come and say you have to evacuate, you still have the right to stay on your property. If you, that's up to you. You can stay there in a wildfire, you're taking the risk on yourself. But what are you doing about this? Are you guys are sending a letter, or what's the first step here for the Justice Center?
We are going to wait for a few days and see if there is a reversal. We don't know, the online mocking and ridicule, like the clip that you talked about, where this guy he's got his cell phone and he's saying, "This is woods. I can't go in there." And then, that's not woods. I can go in there. This is woods. This is not woods. This is woods. This is not woods. And he's going around, and it's just so completely ridiculous and arbitrary. There's another one put out where they've got a guy and a girl are walking through the forest, and all of a sudden, click, there's 6 guys with machine guns or with some kind of firearms say, "You're under arrest for hiking in the woods." You got 6 people there. And so if this policy doesn't get reversed within, let's say, a week or 10 days, we'd write a demand letter. We'd point out what is wrong with it legally, and then, go from there. And I don't think it would be too hard to find an applicant who lives in Nova Scotia who'd be willing to be an applicant to challenge this in court as a unreasonable restriction on our freedom of mobility, which is protected by Section 6 of the Charter.
And the other one that I wonder about, the Prime Minister Carney, there is his job is to protect the Charter. Why wouldn't he make the call and say, "This stop, just walk that back"?
Well, the Charter doesn't oust the federal and provincial division of powers. So, yes. For example, the Constitution of Canada gives provinces exclusive jurisdiction over healthcare. You wouldn't know that if just looking at what's going on with the federal government in the Canada Health Act. But in any event, you've got federal jurisdiction, provincial jurisdiction. So it is provincial jurisdiction for a premier of a province to put forward some, terms and conditions on the use of public lands in the province. So it's outside of Carney's control that way, because they're separate spheres of jurisdiction, federal and provincial.
But it would be a good demonstration of his One Canada to actually make the phone call and say, "That's enough." Right? Like, this is ridiculous.
Well, Yeah, I think he's got his hands full with the Trump and tariffs thing right now. But and I would, if there's any people in Nova Scotia that are watching this show, then contact your local representative, contact the Premier's office, and let them know that this is not justified and it's not even intelligent.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And then this is Sean Foyt put this out, and it was one of his tweets that he put it out there, and he's faced a lot of issues, and you're working with him now as well on his how many concerts have been canceled by municipalities saying it's unsafe for a Christian singer to sing. Like we got a headline here: the New Canada, no walking in the woods and no singing allowed. So what's going on with Sean right now?
Well, the Justice Centre's lawyers have written a letter to the city of Abbotsford, basically warning them to reverse their decision to ban Sean Foyt's concert. Reverse your decision, or else legal action is going to follow. They don't have a leg to stand on. Governments are required under the charter to be neutral. There's a duty of state neutrality. So if you have a public park, or it could be a government-owned, government-run conference center in a city, if you've got government-owned facilities or you've got public parks, public places, you can't pick and choose and say, well, the only people allowed to sing here are those who align with our, CBC, Liberal, NDP values, and we're going to exclude people that might have a conservative or a Christian or a libertarian perspective. Government simply cannot do that. It's illegal under the charter. They have to be neutral in how they manage public spaces. So, you allow, if there's some public park, whether it's a federally run Parks Canada or whether it's a provincial park, if there is a public park and if you allow music concerts there, you allow music concerts for everybody. You don't look behind the music and start looking at the musicians' politics and say, oh, well, you're an evil Trump supporter and you tried to run for Congress with the Republicans, and you're against abortion and you reject the transgender ideology. Therefore, you're not allowed to play here. But other musicians with the correct viewpoints are allowed to play. You can't do that as a government. It's a violation of the Constitution.
What logic did Abbotsford give to Sean Foyt on why they're refusing him?
They're dropping hints about safety and security, which is also a red herring, because if there are threats, it's coming from groups like Antifa, which protested, or there was some representation from Antifa people protesting outside of a church in Montreal. This would have been on Friday, July 27th, when Sean Foyt's concert was canceled by the city of Montreal, but there was a Montreal church that agreed to host the praise and worship. So there's Antifa people outside. So yes. What I've often seen in the last 20 years of defending free speech is that governmental authorities, especially universities, they love to talk about safety and security, and then they like to say, well, sorry, it's a security risk, so you're not allowed to have your display or your rally or your concert or your prayer service. It's not allowed because it's a security risk. And if we buy into that logic, that's very dangerous as well, because it just gives, like a Hecklers veto, gives veto power to anybody who disagrees. All they have to do is threaten to show up and cause some violence, and boom, you can get somebody else's event canceled just like that.
Are municipalities now within their right to say, though, like if you're going to have an event like we had here in Kelowna, Wake Fest, and they say, yeah, you're going to bring a big event in, but here's the cost for security. Why wouldn't they just say that to them? You can have your event, and here's the cost for security. We'll be putting RCMP officers in place, or whatever, the Abbotsford Police in place, and this is the bill for the security for that.
Well, some years ago, the University of Alberta told a campus pro-life group, you can put up a pro-life display on campus, but you have to pay us $17,500 because of safety and security concerns. So effectively, they completely censored the club because these are students. They don't have $17,500. Right. And if there is a threat to safety and security, it is not coming from the people that have set up a display. Or in Sean Foyt's case, the threat to safety and security is not coming from a bunch of people that are singing religious songs and, maybe raising their hands up in the air, maybe doing a bit of dancing, whatever they're doing. They're not the threat to safety and security. So if a university or a municipality is going to start rendering invoices for threats to safety and security, it should be rendered against the people who are actually threatening safety and security, whoever they might be. And it's not hard to find out who they are.
Yeah, I guess like with Wakefest and that, it's like a fair application though too, right? So if your event is 10,000 people, this is what we really have. The requirements for security would be, 5 people or whatever that is. Like based on the size of your event. I know they did that here in Kelowna, where they had, the Wakefest was a pretty big event, right? I don't know how many people brought in, tens of thousands of people and stuff like that.
You could argue it both ways. I think modest security costs for a large event that can afford it, like that's very different from a small group on campus that wants to peacefully express an unpopular opinion. You could also argue that that's just part of the tax revenues. Taxpayers pay for that because that's part of a free society is, different individuals and groups have events. And if some security is required, well, that's just part of the regular policing budget. We don't start necessarily charging homeowners, based on how many times a police car drives by to prevent a break and enter, right? It's an aggregate taxpayer's cost.
Have you got a response yet from Abbotsford at all?
To my knowledge, no response yet. The letter was just sent yesterday, Wednesday, I believe, and it might be a few days. The letter is on our website, and it's an interesting read. It goes through all the different legal arguments and the sections of the Constitution that apply, et cetera. It's about 6 or 7 pages.
Yeah, Ian and I went through this. Like I said, we do a daily news show. We went through to see what we could find, to see what dirt we could find on Sean, and we weren't that lucky. We couldn't find a lot of dirt other than, a lot of the news outlets brand him as a MAGA singer, and I'm just like, we put the story up and we call him a Christian singer. You know what I mean? Like, I think by branding him, I think a lot of the compromised media like to brand, they like to pull out the label gun, just like, during anti-vax, COVID, or anti-vaxxer, and because that minimizes, marginalizes people and allows you to figure out who to hate and who to dispel and stuff like that. Those labels are actually very dangerous, and the media seems to like to throw them around.
It's a smear campaign that the CBC caused against, and it's backfired because he's gotten lots of publicity, and every venue that's been canceled so far. Right? I never heard of him before. July. I think it was the Friday, July 25th, when there was the situation with the church in Montreal, and somebody threw a smoke bomb inside the church, and I hope that the police are actively looking to arrest that person, because that is criminal conduct.
They have the video of the guy. They actually have video of the guy that threw the smoker bomb in there. I mean, it's pretty hard not to find the guy.
Well, there's 3 million people in Montreal, and he could have been from outside of the city. But I hope that they're looking actively to charge this guy criminally, because it's a serious, well, how serious it is a matter of opinion, but it's definitely a serious, or it's definitely a criminal offense to disrupt a religious service. And I think even if it wasn't a church, it is, I'm sure it's criminal conduct as some kind of mischief to be throwing smoke bombs around and interfering with people lawfully enjoying use of their property. So it's criminal conduct, and I hope the police will take it seriously in Montreal and in the rest of Quebec.
Well, if
this labeling, you talked about labeling. If there was an American Christian singer touring Canada who happened to be a supporter of the Democratic Party and who happened to have opinions that, generally align with the Democrats in the U.S., if the CBC was running a story on this person, they would say American Christian singer doing tour of Canada. They wouldn't say Democrat singer. They would just say American singer. But because
they would leave out the word Christian as well, they would just say American singer, right? Yeah.
Maybe they do that. But here they've got this MAGA musician, makes it sound like Sean Feucht is touring Canada promoting Donald Trump at every rally, which, by the way, if he was doing that, he should have the freedom of speech to do that. I'm not saying he should be censored on that account, but it's this mischaracterization. The CBC knows that most Canadians, especially now, more so than 6 months ago, most Canadians are quite anti-Trump, right? So they say, oh, this is a MAGA musician, and it makes it sound like he's going to be going all over Canada preaching the wonders of Donald Trump and how great Donald Trump is, when in fact the guy is a Christian musician who happens to have pro-Trump political opinions, very different from what the CBC is portraying.
You want to talk about freedom of speech? Like a lot of people think that Elon Musk rescued the world when he took over X because all the platforms are being censored. And, like obviously X is one platform that the Liberal government does not like as well. And it's now the #1 news app in Canada as well. And I think in about 126 different countries. And if the police can't identify this person that threw the smoke bomb, I am sure the community on X will identify him in a hurry.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I know that the Rebel did this once before in Edmonton. There was some demonstration at the legislature, and there was a guy and he had the like nose rings and dreadlocks and whatever. He had a very distinctive appearance. He assaulted a reporter and smashed, hit the camera out of her hands, and it was a criminal assault. Yeah. And so they put that image out there, and within a day and a half, the police had nabbed this guy, and they charged him criminally with assault because he's not entitled to assault a reporter just because he probably dislikes the Rebel. So likewise, I hope that the Rebel will put the picture of this guy on the internet, and he should be caught and criminally charged.
Well, they did that when all this Tesla stuff was going on in the U.S. too, when people were damaging Teslas. Like people buy a Tesla and all of a sudden, the other people are screaming and, telling them they have to sell their car. And it even happened here in Kelowna. A young lady I know, we do this Tesla talk show, and she said she was at the Tim Hortons lineup, and some guy came up to her screaming. She didn't know what was going on. She's a young girl, and she was just like, puzzled what was going on. And the guy was literally screaming at her, and she rolled down her window, and he was telling her that she needed to sell her car because she's driving a Nazi car. And she's like, what's going on here? So she was just puzzled. And he said, and she was just talking calmly to him, and he calmed down a bit. He said, well, at least put a sticker on it that says that you bought it before Elon went crazy. And she's just like, okay. She still drives it though. So, you know what I mean? Like there's crazy people for sure. But this cancel culture is starting to fail in the US too. Like, what they tried to do again with Sydney Sweeney there, where they tried to cancel her because of her great genes or whatever. I mean, they've made her into, everybody knows who Sydney Sweeney is now. I mean, most of the time you wouldn't know who, a person is that models for a car or for whatever. I don't know, you wouldn't know, like American Eagle, most people wouldn't know who's the current spokesperson or spokeswoman for the brand. But I think everybody knows who she is, just like everybody knows who Sean Feucht is in Canada right now, if you actually follow the news at all.
But the cancel culture, it's a serious problem, especially when I found it very disconcerting to hear the rationale presented by some of these municipalities, like in Montreal. They said, we don't want Sean Feucht to be singing because he does not adhere to our values of respect and diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, the inclusion's a funny one because they're not being very inclusive if they're saying that, your pro-Trump people or people with a pro-Trump political opinion are not allowed to, make use of a public space. That is not inclusion, that's exclusion. But the twisted thing is, there was another comment that, he doesn't represent Canadians. He doesn't reflect who Canadians are. It's like, that's not the point of a free society. A free society is that whether what I'm saying is, whether 1% of the people agree with me or 99% of the people agree with me or 0% of people agree with me, that's not the point. In a free society, people can speak their opinions, and they can also play their music and perform their arts. And it's not a popularity contest. So it's kind of twisted that you've got these politically minded municipalities who just have no understanding of the proper role of government, and that is state neutrality when letting people use a public park.
I think they got away with way too much during COVID, and they still think that works. And I think that's the thing. They think whatever they dictate is kind of like, and then they had the media that played right into what they wanted. And then they had, obviously these people that kind of like virtue signaling stand up, and they repeated on social media. I'm going to play a little clip here from Steve Jobs did this for Apple here way back in 1984. And I think we're in this moment here in Canada. Let's play this clip. We're going to play it here in a second.
The first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of any contradictory thoughts. Our unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce
There you go,
Mac.
I feel like sometimes during COVID, we were staring at the screen like that, and we definitely need to find the person with the red shorts to break us free of this government that believes they have more rights over us than they are elected officials. They need to remember that elected official, the power comes from the people. The power does not come from the position.
Well, you have to wonder with the Nova Scotia Premier and with other people in authority that are coming up with ludicrous rules that are completely devoid of logic and science and common sense. Are they doing this? Do they get some sort of a psychological thrill or psychological pleasure from oppressing people? These are the questions that come up in my mind, because there's just no logic to saying, there would be logic to say no campfires or no smoking in the woods, but to say that you can't hike in the woods, that's somehow going to reduce the risk of forest fires. I mean, it's so far-fetched. You have to wonder if this guy is just high on power and just gets a kick out of feeling like he's controlling people.
I wonder if it's more that there's a bunch of people, especially the people our age, that are phoning, screaming for measures to stop the forest fires, and we need to do more, we need to do more, we need to do more. And he's like, well, here's more, right? And then he appeases that small base of people that scream and pick up the phone all the time, and where the silent majority doesn't say much. Now maybe they will say something, but it's just, like even during COVID, how many people were actually screaming for more restrictions, and as opposed to, and the government deputized people, the media deputized people to turn in your neighbor, turn in your friends, don't allow your friends and neighbors to come to your house. And they did that example there where they went to that in Quebec where they knocked on the door and they found, like she had more than 2 people in the house or something like that, her own family, and they arrested them.
Well, sometimes people have a hard time accepting that there's some problems that government cannot solve. There's a documentary coming out. It may have been released already, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's called BC is Burning. And it's a retired forester who put it together and explains how the forestry management practices have contributed to the larger numbers of fires that we've been seeing in recent years. But some people like to believe the government can just fix every problem. They like to believe government can stop a virus, which of course is impossible. It's never been done in human history, and lockdown certainly did not stop COVID from spreading to every person living in every city, every town, every village, every hamlet in Canada, everywhere where people lived. Lockdowns didn't stop COVID from going into nursing homes and going everywhere. But yet people, they wanted to have this belief that, well, the government can stop a virus, or, some following a bunch of rules can somehow stop a virus from spreading. And it didn't work. The virus did spread everywhere. But, this is the mindset that some people have. They cannot accept that there's some things about reality that you cannot change. We can't change everything.
Yeah, the bigger problem in that whole thing, and then this is kind of where you come into play, is they shut down dissenting voices, shut down dissenting doctors, punished them, silenced them, took away their license to practice, all kinds of things. I've interviewed a few of them. And I also did a lot of stories on the forestry stuff too. It's like, they shut down dissenting voices, and that's the bad thing, because they talk about this is the science. Science is questioning science, and media's job is to hold power accountable. And Canada has a compromised media because it's all state-funded mostly, and obviously, they're supporting, and it's not government-funded media. I want to correct that, because it's liberal-funded media, because the other party would get rid of the funding. So the media, almost has a vested interest to keep the Liberals in power.
Well, we get a very biased message. You see that with the CBC, for example. They refer to if somebody's anybody who expresses a conservative or Christian or libertarian opinion, the CBC will say it's controversial. Yeah. So Sean Feucht is controversial because inside their echo chamber, the only people they hang out with are like-minded people that have that liberal NDP Green Bloc worldview. They hardly ever meet or talk to Canadians that don't have that particular ideology that they subscribe to. So they call it controversial. But when the CBC says that conservative or libertarian or Christian opinions are controversial, that's actually saying more about the CBC than it is about Sean Feucht. Yeah,
and I would say to the CBC is like, they take your tax dollars, my tax dollars, they take all tax dollars. They're not saying, oh, well, hey, we don't want to take any of the controversial tax dollars, right? They take all the tax dollars, but they don't represent the voice of Canada. They do not represent. They represent a smaller segment of Canada, especially the extreme left of the population and the ruling class, the Laurentian elite there.
Well, I'm encouraged by the growth of independent media in Canada, like your Kelowna station, and you've got the Epoch Times and the Western Standard, and you've got the Rebel and True North and Juno News, etc. And I know, like the Justice Centre, being the only civil liberties group in Canada that called for an end to lockdowns, our supporter base tripled from 2019 to 2021. We tripled in size, and that's while getting completely boycotted by the CBC, CTV, Global, every government-funded media. Basically, did not mention the Justice Centre because we were, we were speaking out against lockdowns, and yet we tripled our membership. Why is that? Well, it's because so many Canadians were looking at alternative media. And so this is a growing trend, and there's fewer and fewer people listening to the CBC. And the same thing in the United States, what's his name? The podcaster, Joe
Rogan.
Joe Rogan, one of his podcasts gets way more views and listens
than all of them combined. They tried to cancel him too. They went after him hard. They went after him when he was taking ivermectin. And he came out and said that he was taking it. They went after him hard. They started dredging up sexual assault cases, everything. They did everything they could to discredit him, and actually grew his subscriber base, or his base, and made him. They're trying to get Spotify to cancel him. They worked hard at it, right? And he was probably one of the first ones that actually came out the other end stronger, and that also allowed other people to say, okay, I can stand up to this, right? And I just played a clip here. We just did the Bitcoin show here. And I played a clip here from Donald Trump Jr. When they were, Trump was president in 2016. The banks wanted to deal with them. They were developers, and as soon as he lost that election, they were debanked. Like, we see this even with Eva Chipwick here in Canada. They were debanked. They were told Trump, Melania, and the rest of them, they were told to get their money out of the bank. They have like 45 days to remove their money from the bank, that they will not support them. So debanking people, we see this here in Canada happening right now with Eva Chipwick, the Freedom Convoy. lawyer. She got that letter from the Royal Bank of Canada. So they went into crypto, and obviously that turned into a payday for them as well. But sometimes you come out the other end better.
Yeah, well, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So as long as you and I and people that love truth and justice and freedom, as long as we are alert and active and engaged and involved and don't lose hope and keep on going, then, in the long run, truth will always vanquish the lie. And in the long run, freedom prevails over tyranny, and justice crushes injustice. But, we just got to do our part and work hard in the interim.
Shine a light on it. That's what I always say. Shine a light on it. Shine it bright. We did get a chance to go to, Mark Carney was here. They wouldn't tell us for the longest time where he was. So we did get a reporter out there to the event he had here in West Kelowna. And we did get to ask, we were only allowed one question. All media outlets were one question, no follow-up. And the question we got to ask was, will he rescind Bill C-18 because it's crushing local independent media? And the response was, I don't know if you got to see it or not, was he said, you're not going to like this answer, but what we've done, you're going to love this now. What we've done is we've increased the funding for CBC, the unbiased network here in Canada.
He said that?
He said that. You got to go watch the clip.
Oh.
It's surreal. It's absolutely surreal. And then he followed up with, well, we do respect independent journalism as well, but, CBC is the answer. They're going to put more money into the CBC, the unbiased network, because the question we posed was that it puts people at risk during wildfires because we can't get our information on the news platform. These are the same people that says Meta's the evil giant that spent over $5 million with Meta because they said Meta's too important of a platform to ignore to get out the liberal message. Can't even make this stuff up, man.
Wow.
Anyway, thank you for that update. And we'll check back on that. You got that stuff going on in Nanaimo too, right? So you're a busy guy lately, right? Lots of stuff to fight against, right?
Lots of fires to put out.
We thank you for keeping that fight up because it's so important to have freedom of speech, right? I'm sure this Nova Scotia Premier is going to make international news here shortly as well. I'm sure he's going to be on Fox and a few other networks pretty soon and some of the other big talk shows. Joe Rogan is likely going to be talking about him too because he loves to diss on Canada now because he said he won't even come here until they have new leadership, right?
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. And we do
Thanks
thank you for
on the
watching
show.
Now Media.
Talk to you again. Take care.
Just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence.